Mommy needs help. Come here, sweetheart. Come on, it's okay. Dylan, come down here, baby.
Dylan! You're going to be in so much trouble if you don't come here right now. Listen to Mommy, you little shit! Do as I say, Dylan!
Hey, don't dip out on me like that. It freaks me out. Come on. I think I found a path back.
Hi, I'm Chris Jordan with the Movie Sleuth, and I'm here with the Pierce brothers, Brett and Drew Pierce, the writers and directors of The Wretched, the #1 movie in America right now. Guys, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having us, man.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
All right, so yeah, The Wretched has been the #1 box office film in America for 5 weeks now. First film to do that since Black Panther. And I know it's notoriously difficult for horror films, let alone R-rated or especially unrated horror films, to ever get to #1 at all. Just, what's that success been like?
I mean, I guess like I guess we know it's just completely unbelievable. It's
Yeah, it's unexpected.
yeah. You wake up every day with different news about the movie, either being in more drive-ins or us going on Good Morning America about it or stuff like that. And none of it feels real, but it's just been insane.
Yeah. And, I mean, obviously, you know, a very specific, unusual set of circumstances led to this, with the big studio movies getting pulled and leaving this vacuum for indies to move into, but plenty of other indies have been opening during this time, and none of them have had this kind of viral success that you guys have found. So what do you think it is about The Wretched that's been resonating so much with the drive-in and the cult cinema crowds?
I think there's a couple things. I think we kind of unintentionally made like the perfect drive-in movie because it's got a little bit of a throwback quality, and drive-ins historically, you know, they were a big sort of hot spot for like creature features and old-fashioned sort of horror movies, and we just happen to have that kind of movie. But it's also, and I think it's sort of an easier decision for people to go see. Like it's a fun roller coaster sort of creepy witch movie, and I think that's just kind of a good escape kind of premise for people to go see right now.
Yeah, I think we love all types of independent film, but independent films usually aren't you're kind of like Drew said, like a roller coaster fun creature feature drive-in movie. So I think the genre that we are, and the fact that the movie's fun and it's kind of a film that anybody can kind of go enjoy. If you like horror, you don't like horror, it still has, you know, a good character development story and fun twists and turns. So I think word of mouth has really helped us, because when people went to the drive-in, they had a really good time, and they just went and told other people, like, guess what? Drive-ins are open, and I saw this movie, and it's a really good time. So I think that's what's been happening more and more. I mean, all the exposure has been great, but I think it's mostly people just telling other people that, like, hey, guess what? There's this good time to be had right now when things are a little dark. You should go check it out.
Yeah, the truth is we don't, you know, like a big studio would spend, you know, $100 million to market their film. And there's some movies out right now that actually have these big budget marketing campaigns. But our movie doesn't have any of that. It's very grassroots. And the drive-in is kind of, in some ways, the fact that's just sort of created like the platform for people to discover our movie. Because otherwise nobody would have heard of our movie necessarily. It would have been harder to get the word out. But drive-ins have sort of been that launching point for people to be like, oh, okay, this is something cool.
And yeah, and like you said, drive-ins are sort of where so many of the great cult horror films were born, like your Dawn of the Dead, Evil Dead, the early Carpenter flicks, and that's where unrated movies always kind of could have their day. So you said it was kind of accidental that you made the perfect drive-in movie. Did you guys, or IFC Midnight, did you have this kind of strategy to recreate this experience going into this at all, or did it just kind of happen?
Oh, the initial plan was we would come out on video on demand, VOD, and like 10 or 12 theaters across the US on May 1st. And, you know, those theatrical releases for most IFC films is just kind of like a way to kind of tell people it's out there. They don't necessarily anticipate that the theatrical element's going to do a lot for the movie. And it's kind of a nice way to tell the filmmakers, like, yeah, you can get all your friends to go see the movie in a theater for like 1 week or 2 weeks maybe. But the pandemic hit, and we just assumed, you know, okay, well, you know, it's a bummer, but we won't be able to come out in theaters, but completely understandable. We want people to be safe. and we were just going to come out on video on demand. But then IFC said, guess what, guys? There's like these 10 or 12 drive-ins we want to try to put it into, and just see how it goes. And you'll still come out on VOD, but you'll be in these drive-ins, and there's one nearby us out in LA, and you guys can go there and get the cast and crew to go and have a good time. And again, we were like, oh, that's cool. That's kind of a fun throwback, fun night for us to have, and probably just be for a week or two. And then it just like, week one hit, and the movie did really well, and a lot of people packed the theaters that we had booked. And then the second week, they're like, hey, let's put it in like 2021. They all got packed, and then they're like, hey, let's put it in 45. They all got packed, and it keeps growing. So
if you build
it's
it, they
all
will
unexpected.
come.
You build it, they will come.
I
It's
think,
unexpected.
creatively, we didn't aim to do, the one thing that we really wanted to do, though, was just create, we were missing the movies, the kind of horror movies we grew up with. We were missing sort of, especially these horror movies that were kind of a little bit darker and scarier, but from the perspective of like teenagers or kids.
What are you doing up here?
Dylan!
Don't let her in.
My son likes to play hide and seek. Can you bring him down?
I didn't say he was here.
You're a very stupid boy.
So I think that sort of was a lot of what Brett and I were excited about with this movie, because movies, horror movies typically have kind of gotten a lot grimmer and more adult. And there's a lot of the sort of elevated horror and these really, which we love a lot of that stuff. But I think with this movie, what we were just so excited about is like the sort of thrill ride, adventure ride, kind of like movies of the 80s and 90s where, it's like a couple of days or a couple of nights and they're struggling to survive.
Yeah, and it's a little bit too, is we're not a sequel or a remake or a franchise. We're just a new idea. So I think there's an element of that people are glamming onto, because I love a lot of those films that come out there, sequels, remakes, and all that stuff. But it's just refreshing when I get to go see something that's just a new idea and it's not built on my nostalgia for something else, or that it's a sequel to something else. So I think people were enjoying that fact too.
And so you kind of touched on it there, some of that appeal of the movies that you guys love that inspired this. But I saw you said in a recent interview that you kind of wanted to make the perfect summer horror movie with The Wretched. So what makes specifically like a summer horror movie to you?
Traverse City, Michigan, man. Up in Northport, Michigan, man.
we love a movie that just is in like and this is something we were excited about, is like an idyllic location where you almost want to go on vacation in that movie. And one of the things about horror movies in general is a lot of times you don't really want to spend your night there. Like it starts out and it's like a creepy house that you would never want to even walk inside. And it just kind of gets darker from there. And with this movie, we were like, let's set it in like a vacation town and make it feel like a vacation and let you settle in with the characters for a minute so you care when things sort of go the wrong way.
Yeah, and I think the thing we missed in horror movies too is I always liked it when these horror films started out with like a beautiful summer home or just a beautiful location. I'm like, man, I really want to go there. And then the second half of the movie, it's just terrifying with the lights off and everything terrible happens in this wonderful place. So, and for me, that kind of harkens back to kind of like that summer movie horror thing that you don't get as much anymore. So we really, we always joked about how there's a lot of scenes in this marina that we shot in Northport, Michigan. And we always reference Jaws. We're like, hey, you know what's great about Jaws? This beautiful summertime. And then a shark comes in and starts eating people. Yep. Let's use this marina just to make people feel like they're on vacation, and then have this witch come in and start eating kids.
I think it's funny whenever we talk to people, there's sort of like an unlimited number of references. It feels like they just throw out like every movie from the 80s and 90s that has a horror element. But like there is a quality to a lot of those movies that like thematically, I think we were just influenced. Like even like Lost Boys, which has very few similarities to us other than the fact that like it's set on this vacation town and it's kind of got this vibe, and it's like there's a pier and a feel, and there's something about that movie that it makes you want to be in that place.
And I think we've all, as independent filmmakers, been boxed in by our budgets, and the budget on Wretched was really, really tight and small. But what you notice is most horror films, and Hollywood does this too, to save money on their low budget stuff, they go, okay, figure out a way to make everybody trapped in this one house and that they don't really ever leave. So we just wanted to make a movie where like, let's go to the marina, let's go to a party in town, let's let's go to the convenience store. I want to say party store because that's what we say in Michigan. But let's go to the convenience store.
And get some pop.
Yeah, get some pop, Yeah, so it was, and then we picked these 2 houses that were just beautiful and idyllic. They were actually a bed and breakfast up in Omena, Michigan. But by doing that, it just kind of created a sense that the movie was bigger than probably what it was, and that's what we were really going for.
And setting it in Traverse City and shooting it in Traverse City, I know you're Michigan guys, you grew up here. Brett, we worked at the same video store in Clawson.
Yeah.
Something that I really loved about it, living here, is it really captured that feeling of what it's like as a young person spending a summer on a lake up in Michigan, and it felt really true to life and kind of captured the authenticity of that. And so, like, how much kind of autobiography is there? Like, how much did it really draw from, like, your lives growing up here and being up there on the water and whatnot?
There's so many different little pieces. The whole movie is just, at the end of the day, you always realize after you make a film that every piece of it is just a reflection of yourself. It's like therapy for the filmmaker. But yeah, that location, that's where we would go camping and tell scary stories and had lots of experiences.
Yeah, well, like
chased after girls, all of the things that Ben's going through.
And we all called it going up north back home. But, I say that to people out in California, you're like, what do you mean? But it is based on our experiences of going up north to these very idyllic places that were beautiful and going camping and spending time on the lake and just being in these summer homes.
And we have this sort of amazingly positive, awesome dad, but things were always a little complicated because our parents are divorced, and we kind of know exactly what it felt like to live in those shoes, and it's a little complicated. And how do you balance both parents? And there's a lot of those elements. And I also I was a new dad right as we were writing this movie and planning to shoot it, and a lot of the horror dealing with, like, what if my child was, something bad happened to them is what it is.
I was just taking it as he wanted to feed his children to witches. So
No, but I was staring at a baby monitor every night with my demonic looking child looking back at me with his glowing eyes, just thinking, this is terrifying. How do I write this in a script? There's a lot of us.
Yeah, it's all Michigan in a weird way. It's like we can't help but write our stories taking place in Michigan because of that, from growing up there. Like, I think there was discussions early on with our producer, like, could we shoot it somewhere else that somehow saves us money or something like that? And we were just like, no, we got to go shoot in Michigan. And we're like, why? Because it's Michigan, and it takes place in Michigan, and we're Michigan.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so you got your start here in the Detroit indie film scene with Dead on Dead and Deadheads. What's it been like going from Michigan indies to now having this nationally successful film? And has your approach to filmmaking changed from going out to LA and the years between Deadheads and now?
It didn't change a whole lot. We learned a lot by being out here in Los Angeles, and Drew worked as a storyboard artist and character designer for a lot of different movies and animated shows and such. And I worked in production as like a producer for reality TV a lot. So I think we learned a lot of the nuts and bolts and like honed our skills. But in the making of The Wretched, it was a lot of the same kind of vibe we had when we were back home making Deadheads and all those other films. It's just like, figure it out yourself, do all the heavy lifting, do your homework, keep rewriting the script, get it there and put it together, but you can do it yourself. It's very DIY in a lot of ways. Cause The Wretched is still 100% an independent movie. We tried to get it made out here in LA with some production companies where it almost happened. And after not being able to make that happen, or just fell apart with them, we were like, let's just figure out how to do it ourselves. We've done this before with Deadheads, and even before that in high school with our buddies making like Dead on Dead and all these like super low budget things. It's like, just go to it with that perspective, but just with all the skills you have now. And that was that was the idea behind, the production.
Yeah, it strangely doesn't feel that much different from what we were doing when we were in high school. Like it feels like the same process. I mean, it doesn't hurt the fact that we like had our mom do craft service and our dad was our PA and our stepdad was our driver and my in-laws were like everything else and a bunch of friends. Like, but it just still feels like even though we had a bigger crew and everything, there are a lot of professionals and really talented people on this one. It just felt like it feels the same sort of creative process for Brett.
It still came down to this was what it was on every other movie we made. It was us in the woods in the middle of the night trying to make a movie.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about the effects work in the film. So your dad, I know, did special effects work on The Evil Dead. So you kind of have practical effects in your family. Like, how much did that inspire your approach to the effects in this film and your decisions to really like go practical and not do CGI and stuff?
I think we just grew up, worshiping Sam Raimi and everything he was able to accomplish. And obviously he was mostly a practical effects guy. And there is a quality that we're just in love with that practical effects sort of like give to a film is there's this like magic trick sort of charm to them. Whereas CG can have charm and be amazing too. It's just a lot harder and trickier to pull off. And they don't naturally have that charm. Even the worst practical effect has some level of charm. That's why we all love the old classic, really bad slasher movies and stuff, because there's a fun to watching like, whoa, what did they do? How did they create that? Whatever, decapitation, whatever. But yeah, I think from the beginning, it was just something that we wanted to pull off. And we had sort of a slightly scary kind of body horror premise that would be ripe for it. And I think it tickled us, the idea that we kind of would get to follow in Sam Raimi's footsteps a little bit and make something in that vein.
And there's a huge advantage of doing practical because you give the cast an opportunity to actually react to something that looks horrifying. You also give your director of photography the ability to actually light the elements that are actually there. So I think you almost end up with a better result in a lot of cases because you're able to look at it through Video Village or through the camera and see what you're going to be showing to people, as opposed to shooting the film and then getting there and hoping that the CGI gets to a place that's convincing.
Absolutely.
So it allowed us to be more picky with how it looked when we were shooting it and knowing what we were capturing and feeling confident to move on instead of just going like, well, let's just shoot it wide and we'll figure out how to have like a witch crawl around in that shot, So. Yeah,
for sure. And yeah, there's some really memorable, really nasty effects moments, and like all the moments of like the witch's hands coming out of the bodies that she's inhabiting, like the hand coming out of the wrist thing, like that. Like I rewound that one and watched that again. So yeah, just like how did you approach doing that and crafting those things? Like what was the experience of doing those effects like?
Yeah, I mean we just pre-planned. I'm a storyboard artist. That's my background and designer. So we basically did a ton of sketches and we sort of targeted all the effect sequences as early as possible. Our plan, we basically storyboarded almost the entire film. And those were like the first sequences we tackled because we wanted to basically give Eric Porn, who's our effects guy, we wanted to give him a map for exactly what he was going to have to create from exactly which angles. Okay. Because, it is a magic trick. It only works in the context of the way that it's shown in the moment that you do it. And so it was this sort of building process, and it was just a lot of pre-production.
Yeah, it just forces you to pre-plan, but in a good way, because I think what the problem you run into with what practical effects force you to do is a good thing, is pre-plan what you're doing. Yes. Whereas CGI, there is pre-planning involved, but it also allows a little more wiggle room to say maybe we can figure something out. Even though I think CGI artists would be like, no, you really want to figure this out ahead of time. But people that aren't CGIers, who unfortunately probably shoot the scene, just go like, yeah, we'll just get the shot and they'll make it work. We'll figure it out in post.
Fix it in post.
That's a nightmare, So.
And another one of my favorite things about the movie is how really unique and really fleshed out and fully developed the occult mythology and the iconography and all that stuff that you built around the witch, or the Dark Mother as it's called in the film. like, how do you approach creating that sort of mythos and building it up and making it so real?
Well, for us, we did a lot of research because we wanted to create rules for our witch, because we kind of realized, looking back on all the witches in other movies, kind of nebulous. There's not really any rules about them other than it's like it's a woman who does evil spells, was kind of like the only thing that was consistent in all the films. Yeah. So we found two myths that we liked quite a bit. One was Black Annie or Black Annis, which is an English myth about a witch that lives in a tree, steals children, and eats babies. And then the Boo Hag, which is an Appalachian like skin walker, skin changer witch, that a creature that lives in other skins. So we took those and we put those together and added a few rules of ourselves. But for us, what we like about building mythology about a creature is giving you just enough to tell you what's going on and to kind of put the picture together in your mind from the visuals we show, and maybe a few bits of, exposition and dialogue, but not going too heavy with that stuff. Because we feel like once you fill in all the corners of exactly how everything works, it stops feeling real and it stops feeling scary. Yeah. So we really kind of went back and forth, even in the edit, of how much to share, how much to present. We saved some stuff about, we wrote a much more thorough backstory about this witch, but we also realized, like, it's good that we know it, but it's not necessary to have it in here. I mean, worst case scenario, it's ripe stuff if we ever wanted to continue the story in more of a way. But I feel like we didn't want to have one of those scenes where Hollywood films get encouraged this all the time, where it like cuts back to 100 years ago and you see how the witch became the witch and all this, because that's not that interesting. I can put together that she's a witch. Obviously, she was something evil or someone that was doing terrible spells or worshiped the devil, and she became this evil creature. That's enough for me to like enjoy the movie. It actually makes it scarier. So,
yeah. And as far as like the iconography and things, we also, a lot of the other myths that we looked into a billion different witches, and there's a lot of interesting ones. A lot of them are like, like good witches, and they're nature witches, and these sort of, they're spirits of the forest essentially. Yeah. And we love the idea of like tying it to nature. So that's why we kind of decided to go with this like deer iconography symbol, and the idea that, we went with a dark witch, but we like the idea that whenever she's nearby, she makes things wilt. Yeah. There's a close tie in all the myths of like witches to nature.
Yeah, almost like evil Mother Nature, but also like we were just excited to like grab, because we have all these different witch myths around the world, and honestly the design of the witch and the look of her and the way she acts is very influenced by, like, we tried to make it influenced by like all of them, so that if you watch the movie and say you're familiar with a particular witch, you'd be like, oh, I see some of those characteristics in the way this looks or this is presented.
Yeah, it definitely had that kind of like sort of dark fairy tale or very sort of folklore-ish vibe to it.
Yeah, it's our evil Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now I'm trying to say this in a spoiler-free way, but there are some things in the last act of the film that make it a very different movie on the second watch. And
yeah.
So like, what was it like writing those layers? Like, did you always know that was there, or was there a lot of like going back and rewriting?
It was actually part of the sort of coming up with the rules and the mythology for the witch. Is we had all these pieces, and then we started asking ourselves, like, if a witch were to survive modern day, because all the witches we were reading about were hundreds of years old, a lot of them. What would the best tool, what would be the best curse,
how could she get away with
sort of
doing
survive?
this? Yeah.
And our idea was, what if she could make people forget? What if she could make people forget about their children? And then we were like, that's a perfect power I've never seen for a witch. It sort of like makes sense in so many ways. And that idea obviously just led to other ideas that just changed the whole script for us. We had already written the entire script with sort of a lot of the other elements that were in place. But we just got really excited. It's fun to...
It caused a heavy rewrite, but it was a fun rewrite because we were so excited about the idea. Like and it was Drew's initial idea. And it just blew my mind how cool it could be and how much fun it was going to be to thread that through the whole story. The hardest part about that is when you're dealing with something like that is, how much do you put it in front of audiences and how much do you keep it in the dark? That was even something that we went back and forth in the edit so many times, like, oh, a little bit more, a little bit less, a little bit more, a little bit less. And we screened it to like friends and family and a lot of random people that just didn't know anything about the movie. and everybody's got a different opinion of, no, I want everything explained. No, it's way too much is explained. So we kind of tried to find the safe balance in between.
Yeah. And I rented it on Prime, and yeah, I watched it again the next day with that in mind. And
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, I think I'm very
it-
curious about people watching it a second time, what their experience is, and I'm actually very curious if people that people that maybe didn't necessarily enjoy it as much on the first time because of some of those elements, maybe they might like it better the second time. It's something as a filmmaker, I'm very curious.
Yeah, there's a
of the
couple
reaction,
Easter eggs that we're really excited for people to
Yeah.
discover. I think there's a lot of little nods that people don't realize are in there.
yeah, just little like lines that have a very different meaning on the second watch and things like that.
Yeah. It's funny.
Yeah, it's funny. We love it when there occasionally we will have people that they call out like several of those things. Like, I thought there was something weird there, and then I got to the end, I was like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's another element of why people are like the word of mouth is happening, is because there's a fun element of there's more to this movie than just jump scares. So, and I think that's the other element that's beneficial to the drive-in situation and all that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So now with this movie's success, I think it is safe to say that you guys have landed on the cult film A-list here. So what's next? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, we'll
after
take
this?
the A-list of cult film. Does that mean I get in like the special section of the new Thomas video that
I think
opens
we
up?
get popcorn whenever we go see movies, like an
Yeah,
extra refill or something.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's cool. We never expected, like, we were so proud of the movie and so excited about it, and we wanted as many people to see it as possible. But we always kind of thought like, oh, we'll come out and some people will see it in this VOD, small theatrical release phase. And then one day we'll be on a streaming service and hopefully a lot of people will see it. And over maybe 10 years, there might be, some more exposure. And people are like, oh, this was a pretty good movie. But we didn't really anticipate like all of it to be up front the way it's been.
Yeah. So where do you go next from this? Is there another film in the works?
Something we want to do.
Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about a ton of projects, but I think the thing that we've been most excited about, because it just feels so special and close to our hearts, is this. We got a werewolf project, which is sort of like probably the mecca, the most difficult thing to tackle as like a horror sort of creature thing. But it's we feel like we have a really unique sort of spin on how to get into a werewolf movie.
Yeah, kind of like with the Witch and the Wretched, we were so excited about kind of adding our own mythology to it and kind of recreating it in a different way. It's the same thing with the werewolf. We kind of went into how can we do this new and what can we get excited about and what's like the modern like angle to get into this instead of just like, I was bitten and I woke up in a park naked.
The fun part about working with
Yeah.
like established creatures is there's so many expectations for what they can be and how they work, and people take those for granted, but you can kind of subvert a lot of those things and it's more interesting.
Yeah, play with them or even have a little bit of comedy involving the fact that we're so ingrained with some of these ideas about them. So
Well, and then the big question is, are you guys going to shoot it in Michigan again?
Oh man, well, it's actually set in northern Canada,
Yeah.
like in the middle of
it's like in a mountain town in the snow. So
the
it might be
location
tricky.
potentially could
Yeah.
be Michigan, but I feel like any producer, unless like for some reason Michigan brings back their like, really aggressive tax incentives, I feel like any producer would murder us if we didn't shoot it in Canada,
Yeah.
because they have all sorts of infrastructure.
But
and
I would also say it's like, we immediately wrote another movie that's in snowy Canada. And, being from Michigan, you pretty much feel like you're half Canadian
Oh,
anyway.
yeah.
So,
oh yeah, eh?
yeah.
So where can people see The Wretched now?
It's currently playing in drive-ins, specifically in Michigan right now. It's playing at the Capri Drive-In in Coldwater, and it's playing at it's in Flint. Is it US 23 Drive-In? I'm always forgetting the name
I
of
think
it.
so. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
And
playing there in Flint. And
I think they're looking to open up the Ford.
on June 12th, which the plan is for us to open up there too.
Oh, wow.
But if you're at home, you can watch it on VOD. We're on iTunes, Amazon, Xbox, PlayStation, all VOD services like through your cable too and stuff like that.
Okay, cool. Well, Brett, Drew, thanks a lot.
No, thank you, man.
Yeah,
It's cool.
thanks, Chris.